So, as we've all heard, now we are being recorded. You know that we are recording the sessions so that people who cannot attend can access the content. The link to the recordings is shared by Priyanka after the session, so that anyone can access those recordings independently of being there or not. But it's always better if you can be here. Let's start with a quick question, a mood check. So, how are you feeling today? Magnificent, good, okay, not well? Of course, we all hope to see everyone feeling magnificent. But we also have to recognize that it is our role on earth to go through all the mood. If we could not experience the not well mood, how would we know about the magnificent mood? We learn about things by experiencing their opposite. This is how life is made. So it's good that to see that at least today we have like nearly 90% of the team who is in the top level between good and magnificent. So great. Those who are okay, just okay, well, you know, just look up and say that, as we said at the beginning, you know, life is a cycle where you go from the magnificent sometimes to the not well. So look up, because you're just okay is the time you can go up, and hope that you wake up soon with delighted heart, you know, that can embrace all the levels of reality. So thank you all for sharing that with us. It's good we are together. You know, being together also is a way to try to lift up your mood. Sometimes get share energy, share information. So let's try to do that today. Although we are not in presence, our bodies are not in presence, but at least our mind, our interest, our focus can be all joined in this session. So maybe to start with, if there are some questions, some answers, some things, you know, from what has happened over the past weeks, maybe that's an opportunity for us to discuss that now. So if there are some specific questions, some specific points that you would like to discuss, maybe some remark, maybe some comment, maybe some experience you want to share or some knowledge you want to add, please, we can take 15 minutes today before the beginning of the course to do that. And if there is nothing, we may move on. We have one point that we'll raise a bit later anyway on more specifically on push and pull, which has been one of the subjects of this week. But beyond push and pull, maybe there are other subjects you want to discuss. There was some discussion about the first expiry, first out, stock management. There was some discussion about warehousing, the rules of best warehousing practices. I don't know if somebody wants to discuss on that. Is there a strong views today on what is more important, a good warehouse or a good procurement or a good distribution? If you have any question, please feel free to raise your hand or to put some notes in the chat. Okay. Well, if something comes up as we progress, we can hear. And maybe Sanjay, something you want to comment on? No, nothing special. Okay. I'll just mention one thing, since we were talking about warehousing. Let me just use this not 15 minutes, but a few minutes from the 15th just to say how important a warehouse is. The warehouse is really, if you look at your supply chain, your warehouse, well, I know some people could challenge me on that, but it's really the center, the heart of your supply chain. And if you arrive somewhere, if one day you are being sent to a mission or arriving on a new post, and you see that the supply chain is a bit chaotic, there are things on orders, we don't know where the orders are, we don't know what's been delivered, these kind of things. The first things you have to do, really where you have to focus, is first you get your warehouse clean. First you get your warehouse clean. If your orders and your warehouse are not clean, you won't be able to clean up all the pipe of the supply chain. You won't be able to do that. So you really need to have, first of all, a warehouse very clean. You do a stock take. Maybe you stop your shipping or ordering for a few days, if that's what it takes, or you do a very rigorous stock take. Once you've done that stock take, once you have a very clear visibility on what's on hold, what's in stock, then you can start to look what has been shipped, what has not been shipped. You can look at the pending orders, see if they are corresponding to something that's gone or something that's not gone. But really, very, very important point. Very important point. Since I see there is one question also about the trend function on forecasting. Sanjay has started to send replies in, about, is it better to do trend or to do Excel function manipulation? The trend is really calculating the trend is a mathematic formula which is just being applied to the list of number which is being given. So maybe the challenge you may have sometimes is to select the data and to make sure that the way you've selected the data is well reflected in the results. When you use the function data, you have some indication about what you have to do, selecting the area for the data, then applying it. I don't have that clearly in mind right now to answer. Maybe Sanjay, you can add something specifically on that.
Yeah. So very quickly, I mean, see, the more important thing here is to understand the logic, because if you understand that, then you will find it easier to put it in the function. Now, in terms of the function, it's not part of the scope of this course to teach you Excel, because we feel that at the level that you are, majority of you, you should know basic functions of Excel. Now, if not, yes, definitely we'll help you. We will send you a tutorial on the trend function. But again, from the perspective of this course, the more important thing is to understand the logic. Now, the logic with the trend function is that we try to understand a trend of an historical event. In this case, which is, let's say, consumption of data. So what is the historical trend of that consumption data in 6 months, 12 months, 24 months? And then we extrapolate it. Okay. Yeah. So Dr. Uber is saying I inserted the formula so that to do the complete, but it did not work at all. Okay. Yes. So trend function in Excel, its operation is it's not straightforward. You have to select all the cells, where you are trying to extrapolate, and then you need to select all the fields, the known X's and the known Y's, which is your consumption data and your time period as well. So what I'm going to do tomorrow, first thing, Priyanka is going to send you a very good tutorial on trend. It will be a small, I think, 10-15 minutes video on YouTube. So do take a look at that. Once you understand exactly how to use the trend function, then go back to the template that we have provided you to use that, and then try to use the trend function again. The other way that you can also learn this is if you're using the template that we have sent you. So do all your calculations, even if it is not coming out. So whatever you have done, send it to us, email it to us. So we will create a parallel structure, wherever you've done the calculation, in parallel to it, we will create the right calculation and right notes of how we did it. So you can compare where you went wrong. So these are the two ways that we can help you. But eventually, the key is that if you're stuck with Excel, then you have to learn Excel. But if you're not able to understand the logic, then that's where we can help you to understand the logic in a much better way. So if it is a logic issue, then yes, like I said, uh, we need to understand the trend of an historical event and then we extrapolate it. So that's how we use trends. But if it is Excel, then of course, you have to put some effort in understanding that. And we'll help you that. We'll send you the tutorial. And then if you can send us your sheets, we can also, put the right way of doing it just beside the cells where you are writing it, and then you can compare. Okay, so these are the two options you have, and hopefully, if you do it a few times, you will be able to figure it out. Yeah, Gilles, over to you.
Thank you, Sanjay. And let me just use this for me. If I speak about my own experience, Excel has been a game changer in supply chain for me, managing supply chain. So there's the way I manage supply chain before I can really help myself with Excel, and then after. It has been a game changer. Everything you want to do, stock valuation, overall stock turnover, monitoring shipment, looking at your success for orders, fulfillment, and these kind of things. All this, if you manage Excel, you can really play with everything you want. And if you have an LMIS, if you can extract the data from the LMIS under Excel, and then if you can play with Excel, particularly using pivot table and these kind of things, you are going to incredibly grow in how you can manage data in supply chain. This is really a game changer. So really, if you have some investment to do in terms of time, in terms of effort, to build your skills in one area, if you want to go in supply chain, I can assure you that investing in Excel mastery will really be a game changer for everything. But it's sometimes it requires a bit of a mindset, and I mean, it's not obvious always. Some like the pivot table, for instance, can be a bit difficult to manage and things like that. But really, I can really insist on the fact that you will gain a lot from progressing on Excel. Very quickly, a review of the course progress as of today. So, I mean, thank you. I mean, congratulations. Everyone is, there's a good progression, really. We can see that people are progressing quite well, quite on track. If you look the ideal progress, which is a bright green line at the bottom, well, you'll see that nearly everyone, most of the participants are not that far. At least they've done more than half. Most of you've done more than the 2/3, and some of you've even completed more than what is supposed to be completed by that time. So really, congratulations. Well, there are two people. I'm not going to say the names, especially that I don't think they are on the course today. So please, if you want to be on track for the completion of the test for the certificate, it's better to try to catch up as from today, and increase your effort. But maybe Priyanka will try to contact people individually to see if there are issues which are blocking them or preventing them from achieving what they want to achieve. I see one hand has been raised. Yaya Fatou, on vous écoute.
Sorry, my casque was my headset. Okay, thank you. I had a question regarding the completion of the course. Like this week, I know we are all maybe workers. I have been very much involved in some analysis in my job, and it's taking so much time. I would like just to know if we will have like a little bit of time to help us finalize all the tasks that we are supposed to do before by the end of, I don't know if there is a possibility to have like an extension of some hours or maybe one day. I don't know.
Yes,
yeah, I was going to that slide actually. So Jill,
sorry.
because she's asked the question already. So because it's coming soon, but okay, she's asked it. So, why not just show it already? Yeah,
Okay.
so here you go.
Okay, Sanjay, I leave it to, okay. Okay, so yes, you have the date which are here, Yaya Fatou and everyone. The course should be completed by the 6th of August. So from that, you can pass the final assessment to get the certificate. You need to have 60% of hires or higher result, and you have 5 attempts to result to get the certificate. So yes, you have a bit more time after the completion of the course, but voilà. I think we cannot be open independently.
Thank you. That's fine.
It's fine with your workload, Yaya Fatou?
Yes.
Okay.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, just to add on to this is that, because, we always see, and this is from experience of running these over and over again, that we understand that, all of you are working professionals. And, sometimes you have really, work pressure that creates hurdles to finish these courses. So the first 4 weeks where, we are with you every step of the way, you must have seen emails you're receiving from Priyanka. We are speaking every week on Thursdays. We're also responding to several discussions forum. We're asking questions to you. We're reviewing your assignments. So all the things that we're doing is the first 4 weeks where, we are with you throughout those first 4 weeks. Now, the next 2 weeks time that we are giving you is actually to make sure that you're not rushing the actual learning in the course, so that you have a bit more time to go through some of the modules again, lessons again, if you want. And then once you're fully sure that you have, seen everything, learned everything, then you go and attempt the final assessment so that you can pass it, in 5 attempts. I mean, we would be really disappointed if you have done all the hard work, you've been with us for 4-6 weeks, and then you can't, pass that assessment with more than 60% marks. Because if you can't, then unfortunately we can't issue you a certificate, because that's a compliance that we have to follow. Because we have been awarded the CPD certification globally on the basis of that. And if we stop doing that, then that certification will go away. So there we are a bit strict, but we can be a bit lenient on the time. But if after 6th August someone has not completed it, then they don't get to complete it. They don't receive the CPD certificate. If someone have started the course and they have not completed the course, they also don't get any further opportunity in the next cohorts, because every cohort we have a lot of registrations, and if you're giving you a seat in the next cohort, that means someone else is not joining it. So it's if you are able to do it this cohort itself, that's great. Otherwise, then unfortunately, we can't extend this registration to the next one. So that's also important to know. And that's why also giving you 2 additional weeks. So that if someone is, for example, if some of the people I see that they are about halfway of the course, they still have ample time to go through all the modules, go through all the lessons. Also look at all the recordings. All these recordings of these sessions are there on the platform. So look at the recordings, you have time, and finish the course properly. And while doing that, also look at the various discussions that has happened. I mean, there's a lot of good material already there in the discussion forums, from different countries' perspective, what is happening in each country, what kind of laws, policies, procedures that have been adopted. There are a lot of things which are really good that you can read, digest, reflect on. So we really recommend you to do that, and that's why giving you those 2 additional weeks, so that you're not rushed, and you can eventually have everything and then finally do the assessment. But please, we would really appreciate that if you don't come back to us and say, no, but even after the 2 weeks, you had some issue and you could not complete the work. I mean,
Thank you.
it won't be warranted. Yeah. So over to you, Sri.
Thank you, Sanjay, for all those clarification, and thank you for asking those questions. Yefatu. So today, just to quickly, what has happened this week, to have a quick review. The focus of the module is on the downstream function and on supply chain enabling function. So there was some discussion today about, over the last days on FIFO, first expiry, first out. Some questions about the push versus pull. We'll discuss about that again, and some element on are we on the same boat, and voice your opinion. The weekly assignment is on last mile distribution. It's a very delicate subject. A lot of push from donors and from, I don't know, a lot of organizations were pushing to really cover this last mile distribution. And in other places, sometimes alternative ways are being developed to have a much more communitary-based health system to cover for the last mile distribution, instead of having something which would be centrally managed and delivered. But that's not exactly the topics we want to discuss now. We've seen that there was some exchanges about push versus pull or versus hybrid. I think there was also some discussion about the hybrid system. So it's not only it's not an exclusive versus, it can be an inclusive versus. So is there someone who wants to discuss maybe some of the points which have already been put on the forum, or some other elements that you want to discuss about your experience of how push and pull can be organized to better fit a supply chain system? Again, please raise your hand if you want to intervene, or just put something in the chat box. Is there someone who has experienced an exclusive system where, for instance, everything would be push or everything would be pull?
Dr. Rubair, you have unmuted. Do you want to say something?
No. It is a mistake.
Okay.
All right.
I will remove.
Is there somebody firing something around you? We heard like gunshot. So I hope everything is safe.
Yes, I was downstairs. How can I say?
Okay, thank you. Mix, yeah, I think the hybrid system is often what is preferred, and it depends a lot on the organization of supply chain. It also depends a lot on the type of product. If you have product with a very regular cycle, quantities will are not changing anymore. For instance, chloroquine for treating water or this kind of thing, which are coming back regularly in huge quantity in bulk. In these kind of things, a push system may be preferred. When you have things which are very seasonal, very depending on context, demand, social context, then you may want to have a much more pull system where the demand is driven by where the consumption is actually happening. As it's been said here also by Ehab Al-Ashkar, of course, it can depend also on the context or the purpose of the product. So not only the type of product, but the purpose of the product. If there is an emergency, you can be in a situation where you may not have all the numbers. For instance, you know that there is a cholera outbreak or something like that. You will need to send a lot of material very quickly, and you will do that by picking, choosing, bulk numbers, large numbers to cover for the maximum. And that may be at the beginning of the emergency, and then 3 weeks down the line, maybe after 3 weeks or 1 or 2 months of emergency, you may move from a push system to a pull system. So again, it can depend in time, it can depend in the context, it can depend on the type of product. It will depend also on where your expertise here is located. If you have a lot of expertise at the front end, you may want to rely on this strong expertise to make the choices about the quantities which are going to be ordered. But if your teams on the front end are weak in numbers, in quantity, or maybe in competencies also for planning, then you may want to centralize, where you may have a very strong and experienced team at the center, where decisions should be made for the push quantities to be delivered. So yes, it's not a versus situation. It's not one size fits all. It's not one blanket decision, but it's more, again, one parameter of the supply chain that needs to be decided depending on the context.
Can I ask a question to everyone? I mean, has anyone used a model which is called informed push? Have you heard of this model anywhere, informed push, or used it for any product category or for a program? Anyone?
Now, Sanjay, I think over to you, Sanjay.
Okay. So, now that we are using more and more electronic systems. Okay, Ihab is raising his hand. Ihab, maybe I'll go later. Ihab, do you want to say something?
Yes, good afternoon, good morning for all. We have two system push and pull, and this is depend on the health facilities that we are working for it. As example, I giving to you two examples. The first one, like some emergency may happen in some site. So in this case, we consider the push system. And for some cases, like for example, there's some health facilities, they don't have like a profession health workers. They have working inside the health facilities. They usually consume whatever has been distributed to them. So we consider the push system to determine the quantities that to be consumed, and then we have working with them like in daily follow-up to monitor the consumption for all the medicine, and especially for the high value medicines. So we in addition to that, we train the pharmacists, the medical doctors, the health workers for the rational medicine use, and then we can shift from push to pull system. For the other side, like if we have like some stable side, we have a data for them. They already used the medicines in the rational way. They are depending on the national clinical guidelines regarding prescribe the medication. So in that cases, we usually share with them the list of the items that we have in our warehouses, and then they provide their feedback. What's the consumption? What's the need? The quantities they are requesting for it. It should be verified by the manager of the health facilities, and then send it to the our central HQ office. They will review their request. According to that, they will pool what they are requested if they see it with the rational use. Consider also the expiry, the stock capacity at the health facilities. All those take in consideration when we put either push or pull system. Thank you.
That's a very detailed and comprehensive account of how both the systems are working in your country and in your organization. That's really good. But I also wanted to discuss and provide some light on is what is derived largely from the private sector on account of automation and electronic systems and higher visibility on data. Although they don't call it informed push in the private sector, but in some countries, for example, in Senegal and a couple of other places where it has been piloted, they're calling it informed push so that it's easy to understand for the health workers or for the supply chain professionals and so on and so forth. But the basic idea is that you need to have end-to-end visibility on data, supply chain data in terms of stock levels at each level, in terms of like stock level to the level of batch numbers and everything, expiry dates, everything, so that the system knows a system. Let's say that it's configured on FIFO, first expired, first out. So the way informed push it works is that it reduces the manual intervention of creating an order, approving an order, and then accepting an order from wherever it will be dispatched. So in all the levels, there are maximum and minimum stock levels. As soon as let's say in a peripheral center, stock level hits the minimum, it automatically generates a trigger that an order needs to be created, and that trigger goes to all the people who are responsible to make that order happen. So whether it is the in charge of the health facility or the pharmacist or the storekeeper, and then also to the warehouse from wherever the order must come. Now, based on that information that is generated from the facility, the warehouse will then dispatch that order. But all this process is predominantly happening automatically without as minimal human intervention as possible. The human intervention is just to check. So they are not going and creating those entries for each product or multiple products or at different order frequencies or whatever. It is automatically triggered by the system. Maybe they batch certain orders so that there is value for money, there is whatever vehicle is being used, it's being utilized properly. But the push model is happening automatically based on the information. So the facilities are not really creating the orders. The warehouse is automatically pushing the products, based on the information that they're getting from the interconnected system, which is everywhere. So this is being piloted in some countries and it has been very successful because it also reduces the effort that is needed at the health facilities by the pharmacists or the storekeepers or whoever that is. And we know that in majority of places, um, we have workforce shortage. So the only thing that the pharmacist or the storekeeper has to do is make sure that the stock levels are being updated in the system at all times. If they do that, then this system works really well. So that
just to add on what you said, in the private sector, it's called vendor managed inventory. And it is exactly the same mindset, is to say that, for instance, if I'm selling Coca-Cola, the last thing I want is that the shop who is selling Coca-Cola run out of stock, because that means that I'm losing sales. So I'm dealing with the shop who is selling the Coca-Cola. I said, don't worry, I take care of your stock. But of course, behind that, there is a contractual agreement about who is paying for that stock. So in the private sector, you have this also. And I think in the examples that Sanjay was mentioning, there must be also some agreement about who is responsible for the overstock and the understock. But voilà, if you hear about vendor managed inventory, which is in the private sector very, very common usage, that means that in fact, it's not the shopkeeper who is managing its stock. It's the product, the one who is producing, the vendor, the producer of the product, who is managing the stock on behalf of the shopkeeper, just to make sure that he can maximize his sales.
You've made it very simple, Gilles, but generally vendor managed inventories are being done at a very large scale, like very big hospitals, or if we take healthcare example, so they're large hospitals. So the smaller ones, it won't work. It won't work if there is no economies of scale in BMI.
We agree.
So
we
it's
agree.
Not very simple.
It's not that simple, but at least it's just to understand the principle. Anyway, over to you, Sanjay, for the follow-up of the course. Thank you all.
Excellent. Thanks, Gilles. Thanks for taking us this far. So today, as Gilles said in the beginning, so this week we have been focusing all on downstream functions. So if I go back to week 1, when we were discussing health systems, so from week 1 to week 4, we have kind of gone through the entire system from a very high level of health system to now the nitty-gritties of supply chain, and where majority of the operational systems they work, which is warehousing, transportation, and everywhere, which is inventory management. So this is what we have been focusing this week. And a key topic which has been doing rounds in public health for several years now is called outsourcing. Donors have been pushing for it for a long time because of its benefits. However, there are several countries who are pushing against it, but there are other countries who have adopted it very effectively, and we will read about it today. So the question that we're going to pose to you today is that is outsourcing really effective? And if so, how? Now, there's a small disclaimer that I want to give in the beginning of this session, that through this session, we are not really promoting outsourcing or promoting any third-party logistics or anything like that. We're not promoting anything. What we're trying to do here is tell you the pros and cons of outsourcing. And then you can apply these pros and cons and these factors and these components of outsourcing in your own environment. And then you can decide yourself whether outsourcing would be a good model in your country or not. Because it definitely has its own merits, but then it also has several challenges and disadvantages as well from centralized warehousing and transportation. So let's get on with it. So to start with, what is outsourcing? So outsourcing is to engage a third party So in this case, when we say third party, why we are saying third party? Because as a supply chain organization, so let's say if you are working in a supply chain organization, so you are servicing your clients, which are hospitals, health centers. So there are clients. So that's the first party. You become the second party. So any other party which is outside of this scope, which is not, let's say if you're talking about health, any other organization which is not directly under this purview, you know, who is supporting you in some supply chain functions would be called third party in this case when it comes to outsourcing. So outsourcing is when a third party provides services to the host organization which were previously performed in-house. Now, for example, what can be outsourced? Procurement can be outsourced, warehousing can be outsourced, transportation, both international and in country, it can be outsourced, security, information management, human resources, all these kind of things can be outsourced. However, the most common and popular function which is outsourced is transportation. There's several reasons for it. Let's say, a key reason is because, purchase and maintenance of vehicles is a costly affair. You also need to have drivers recruited, trained. You have to pay salary for those drivers. You have to, pay for the fuel. You have to make sure that, every time you're sending the trucks, you're utilizing the space, because if you're not doing that, then you're losing money on those transport journeys. So there are a lot of things. So to make sure that the funds are being used judiciously, transportation is one key function which is mostly outsourced in several countries and for several products and programs. Okay. Now, the key question is, how can outsourcing be beneficial? So there are, so this entire session is based on, reviewing different case studies, different examples from different countries, and also from our own experiences of, supporting different countries and organizations in going towards outsourcing services. So on this slide, you see some issues which are faced by public health organizations, and how can those issues be solved using outsourced providers. Now, before I talk about these issues and the advantages that the outsourced providers bring, a key thing to notice here that if the system that you have created, it has some systemic issue, it has some very core problem, then even if you outsource some portion of that system, those issues will be very difficult to resolve, because you can hand over the problem, but then the problem won't go away unless you solve it. So if someone says that, outsourcing will solve all the problems that you're facing in a supply chain as a blanket statement, it would be wrong. It can solve some particular issues related to process and managing certain things, but it may not be able to solve everything. So let's now understand why outsourcing and how outsourcing can be beneficial in public health or in the public sector. Now, one of the key issues that are faced by organization is the lack of in-house skills in terms of transportation or warehousing or distributing medicines, because they may not have supply chain trained supply chain staff in their countries, and there may be very high turnover as well. For example, we have worked a lot in Ethiopia with the organization, supply chain organization of Ethiopia, and they have a very high turnover. So every year they see at least 7 to 8% of turnover in their organization. So people keep on changing and they keep bringing new people. So they have a very high training cost, and whatever that they're trying to do, because of high turnover, it gets very difficult sometimes. And it's not just Ethiopia, there are other countries as well where there is very high turnover in the public sector. So what outsourcing does is that it brings very specialized skills to do a very specialized work. So for example, transportation, warehousing, or even procurement. So your outsourced providers will have that specialized skill that is required for that very specific function. So that you don't have to worry about hiring a lot of people with the right skill, with the right mindset. You can just hand over the entire function to that outsourced provider. The second issue that the lot of organizations face is limited resources at disposal. So, as most of you know and have seen, a good part of public health supply chain in the countries that we are working in, it is run through donor funds. A lot of expansion, system strengthening, and development is run through donor funds. You know, the governments are generally funding the regular operations, and expansion and everything in several cases is funded by donors. So a lot of time it becomes difficult to expand the range of the services without those additional funds. So outsourcing also helps in that area, because in outsourcing you will not have to invest those funds at once. You can create long-term contracts. You can use funds from your revenue system as well. You know, so and hence you will be able to expand services without investing in infrastructure or a lot of staff or several other things. In public health supply chain, a lot of time you don't have very high volumes to transport, especially in smaller countries. For example, we have Gambia here, uh, we have Cameroon here, although Cameroon is fairly big. Uh, but you understand, you know, smaller countries, there are a lot of small countries in Africa. Now, in those countries, you know, you may not need big trucks. So, you know, the volumes are quite small. Even in a small van, that may also be large for a lot of transport. You know, so to avoid that, you can use 3PLs where they, you know, consolidate a demand from different clients and then you know, deliver the products. Of course, when we talk about health, we have to make sure that the product needs to be transported in the right way, in the right temperature, humidity, in all that sense. But still, there are ways of consolidating demand from different places. For example, a vendor can be working for uh, you as a public health supply chain organization, and they can also be working for different hospitals, and they can combine those orders, for example. There can also be variable demand. So in some months, you're not doing deliveries at all, while in other months, your delivery rate is quite high. You have to deliver quite often because of high demand. Let's say malaria season or any other season, for example. So, you know, in that case, if you own a fleet, so then 5 months out of 12, let's say, your fleet is sitting idle. You're just losing money on that. While if you go for outsourcing, then you're just paying the outsourced provider for the work that they have done in the year, rather than, you know, if they're not working, then you're not paying them. And then finally, inefficient service delivery. It's a very common issue in a lot of public health supply chains, that the service delivery is inefficient and customer satisfaction is close to 60 to 70%, you know, which is very less. If you look at private sector, they strive to be more than 95%, and still they cry over it. That why is it not 100%, you know? So 60%, 70% customer satisfaction is very less, and that can be improved using 3PLs, since their motive is to earn profit. And of course, they will make sure that you know, they do make the deliveries in the right manner, in the right time, at the least cost possible for them and for the client as well. So all this kind of things, you know, can help organizations to choose for outsourcing in certain cases. But of course, we'll see in the coming slides that how you can make that decision. So the key question here for everyone to ask is outsourcing recommended everywhere? I mean, even if a system is doing well, can you go and recommend outsourcing? I mean, you have to look at different things. But if these are the issues that are being faced by the organization that you're working for, then outsourcing may be a solution. I'm not saying it is always a solution, but it may be a solution if all the other factors that you're going to see in the next slides, they favor the system. Okay, and what are they? We'll come to that. But before, let's look at an example from World Food Program. Now, all these examples, they are in the case study that has been shared with you. So please do read about that. They have very good examples and good case studies. Now, why we're talking about World Food Program? Because they have been utilizing third-party logistics, outsourcing, warehousing and transportation for a very long time, for several years. Yeah. So they're saying 50 years. So close to 50 years they're using this. And World Food Program is one of the most successful entity globally to have transported food items, nutrition items throughout the world, in emergencies, in war zones, wherever possible, and they're very efficient in that. Okay, and so how do they do it? So if you see on the screen, it says that they run 5,000 trucks globally every day, out of which only 800 of them are their owned vehicles. Today, it may be slightly different. They may have more trucks, more owned vehicles as well. I mean, this data is about 4 years old, but you get the picture that, a very small percentage of trucks are owned by them. And it is only in those places where there is no commercial market. So most likely war zones, where there is a humanitarian crisis, or there is a collapse of the economy or private sector. So to name some countries like Yemen, Syria, for example, right now, Ukraine probably, and in Africa, let's say, some countries where we have seen civil war in the past, those places, like recently, last year, there was a civil war in Ethiopia. At that time, probably, World Food Program was sending a lot of materials in the northern Ethiopian region. So they might be doing it with their own trucks. So they're only using their own trucks in the areas, one, where there is no commercial market, the routes are very difficult, or there is a conflict, for example. And they also provide security for those trucks when they're in the conflict zones. Now, the way they do it is they have a pre-qualification system, and this is not just for World Food Program. This is true for the overall UN, United Nations, all different UN organizations, where they have pre-qualified transportation, freight forwarding agents or third-party logistics agent, who they have pre-qualified with standard rates. So here also, if you see, it says, they have biannual RFQs based on the pre-qualified list, based on cost per metric ton, and contracts are issued for about 12 months period, and regular monitoring and KPIs and all. So they monitor all these things very continuously and judiciously. And since it's a very competitive market, so they get very, very good pricing, and also because the volumes are quite high. So this is a scenario that the reason why we want to show you this is because this is a very successful outsourcing model which has been running for close to 50 years. So outsourcing definitely has its merits, but of course the context matters. So here the context is that the volume is quite high. There's a very high competition in the market where in various places where WFP operates, and they create a pre-qualified list. So they already have like 10, 15, 20, 30 vendors in their list, out of which they choose every time. So they don't take eternity or a very long time in choosing those suppliers. And the rates, they remain constant throughout that contract period. So it cannot change. And in this case, it's a very simple metric per or a simple indicator for the cost. It's per metric ton, period. There is no other cost. whatever the service provider is doing, that's within their cost is whatever that is, it's calculated within that per metric ton indicator. So that's how it's successful. So the question here for us is when to consider outsourcing. So, when I was saying earlier, is outsourcing recommended everywhere? So how do we understand that? We need to understand the conditions. So there are two types of conditions. First is internal conditions, which is conditions internal to the organization who is trying to look for outsourcing. And then the external conditions, which is like the market, overall market, and other external conditions with respect to the organization. So in terms of internal conditions, there are four where we have clubbed everything. So we have four categories. First is the core competency, operational processes. Number three, ability to manage vendor. And fourth is the technical and political environment linked to that organization. So number one is core competency. So you need to ask yourself, what is your core competency? Okay. So if you ask World Food Program, they would say their core competency is, understanding the nutritional needs of the community, which is in conflict or wherever it is required, and sourcing that, whatever is required. Let's say it's rice is required, or supplements are required for children, for example. So sourcing that is their core competence, but transporting that may not be their core competence. That's why they're using third-party logistics. So you need to ask yourself, you need to ask the organization, what is the core competence? So if something is not a core competency, then you can look at outsourcing it. Another question that you need to ask in there is, do you have skilled personnel who can, take that responsibility? And if not, then definitely you need to go for outsourcing. Second point is operational processes. You need to look at, review, monitor your processes and figure out which processes are not working well, which are lagging behind. And then ask if these processes or functions are outsourced, will they perform well or not? If the answer is no, then you need to improve those processes. But if the answer is yes, then you can, of course, look for outsourcing. Third is, if you're able to manage vendors, because if you need to manage vendor, first of all, you need funds to contract a vendor, give them a contract. You need to have people to manage the vendor. You need to understand the risks as well, because of course, outsourcing also has its own set of risks. If you're not able to manage external vendors, then definitely outsourcing is not for that organization. You need to be able to manage the vendor, otherwise that it will be very difficult. So it's very similar to managing pharmaceutical manufacturers. So if you're able to manage pharmaceutical manufacturers, in the same way you need to manage your third-party logistics vendors. And then finally, is it technically and politically feasible or not? I mean, there may be some government pressure that you need to do insourcing versus outsourcing. There may be lack of skills in that, in terms of process management. There may be some financial issues, linked to the environment. So you need to also look at that. But all this with respect to the organization, not outside it. So that is the internal condition. If we look at the external condition, we have three. One is the analysis of private sector. Second is the cost benefit analysis. And third is the process maturity of the existing companies, again linked to the first one. But in the first one, we're trying to understand, are there adequate providers in the market, if there will be enough competition, and if the vendors, single or combined, more than one, they can reach the entire length and breadth of the country. Sorry, because if they can't, then your outsourcing model may fail for certain places. You need to also do cost benefit analysis to understand whether outsourcing will be cheaper or not. And that is very important. And will it lead to improvement of your service delivery? So these two questions are very important. And finally, you need to also determine whether the private sector vendors, what level of process maturity do they have? If their process maturity is less than your insourcing, then it's definitely a no-go. But if their process maturity is higher, then you can look at it. Okay. So at this point, I'll just pause for a moment, and then Priyanka will launch a poll, which is about if any service is outsourced in your country. It's a very simple poll, just to break the monotony and to also understand what's happening in your countries as well. And I guess after this, yeah. So after this, Gilles, over to you. And if there are any questions about the internal conditions, external conditions, or if outsourcing is recommended or not, you can ask and we can discuss those issues. And then after Gilles will take over. Okay, so again, like I said in the beginning, majority of places, either it is insourcing or transportation is outsourced because, like I said initially, it's the most common function to be outsourced because of several reasons. So if you have any questions, please raise them. Any question related to outsourcing, the conditions, any insights you may have from your countries which you may want to share with everyone, whatever that is. I mean, so far, if you have anything, please, it would be good if you speak up. Yes, Dr. Rubair, uh, uh, your thoughts are welcome. Over to you.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for sharing with us outsourcing concepts. And me, I want to ask one question, because in my country, for example, I'm not working in a supply chain organization. I'm working in National Medicine Regulatory Authority. So we used to collaborate with an international organization called Chemonix, for instance. And Chemonix here, very upstanding us in our procurement process. They help us to manage the how can I say?
You may also ask in French if you're not very comfortable, and we can translate it in English.
Ok. So, j'étais en train de dire qu'il nous aide surtout pour pouvoir faire le réapprovisionnement. Ils apportent des soutiens techniques, surtout technical support in our supply chain health. So, is it an outsourcing too? Outsourcing too? That's my question.
I don't think we can really speak here about outsourcing, because in fact, sorry, I answer.
Yeah, please.
Sorry, Sanjay, if you want to go ahead.
No, it's okay, please. I guess maybe we need to translate the question first of all.
Yeah, so the question is, yes, I mean, it was said, most of it was said in English anyway, so I think it was clear. The only part that was said in French was that one of the help that Chemonix is providing is about forecasting and doing the procurement for reorders, so reordering process. In fact, it's a partnership here. It's not really an outsourcing because the relationship is not a client-supplier relationship that you're having with Chemonix. Chemonix is coming here and you have a partnering agreement. Chemonix is funded by a partner of the national government, most probably USAID funded, or another American donors. So there are some partnership agreements, which are being signed at all levels with the government and other governments and between agencies. So in that particular case, really, we are not in the same scheme of an outsourcing. When we speak about outsourcing, and really the word we've used throughout the discussion is a third-party logistic. and logistics service provider. So when we're talking about logistics service provider and when we're talking about third-party logistics, we're really talking about commercial actors who are based in a country or in an area and who are offering services for which they are being paid. And the relationship is really a relationship where you have a service provider and you have a client who is you, for instance, in that situation, who is giving orders and ensuring that the quality level are being fulfilled and that all the terms of the contract are being fulfilled. So the relationship, and particularly the power relationship, is completely different. Even if you have a partnership agreement with Chemonix, it's harder for you to go and complain directly to them about a service level that they would not have met. Although, you know, in the principle, this is what should be happen. What should happen if they don't meet, but it's not something you can do on a daily basis. The relationship is therefore quite different, in fact. I don't know, Sanjay, if you want to add something on this.
Yeah, it's actually it's a very interesting and complex problem actually, because there are some organizations similar to Chemonix who can be labeled as outsourced vendors or partners. You know, I can give you a couple of examples. So some of you may have heard of SCMS or TFSCM. They come in these two names, and their primary role was to bring in you know, products for HIV, TB, and malaria, predominantly HIV actually. Now in that role, they were actually kind of doing outsourcing, but technically speaking, you as a client or you as a Ministry of Health, you were not paying them. They were paid for by USAID, which is the donor in this case. So they were kind of an outsourcing partner for USAID rather than you. For you, they were just a partner or a technical support. So, you know, slightly blurred lines. Now, similarly, there's another organization called IDA Foundation, for example. They're an NGO. They are an international procurement agent. Now, they are an outsourcing vendor or outsourcing partner. When you want to purchase several medicines or medical supplies or equipment in bulk, so if you want to purchase in bulk and you don't want to contract 30, 40, 50 manufacturers, you give a contract to IDA Foundation. They will do all the work of contracting on your behalf, and you will be the one only working with IDA Foundation to get all the bulk materials at once. So there, they are doing your job of procurement. So they have become an outsourced vendors. Similarly, there's another organization called I+ Solutions. I'm sure a lot of you must have heard of it. They also have slightly blurred lines. In some cases, they work as a outsourced partner, while in other cases, they work as you know, technical assistance provider. So there are some organizations where the lines are not very clear, and a key reason behind it is that you as Ministry of Health or a national supply chain organization, you are not paying them, because it's also a matter of financial control. If you're not paying them, then you know they are a partner, they're not really a vendor. Now maybe so does that answer your question, Dr. Ruben?
Yes, I think I get it. I get it very correctly. Thank you. Yes.
Okay, excellent. Maybe we can hear from Madam Okafor. Can you ask your question here so that you know we understand it much better and then respond? Over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. No, I was asking about outsourcing of that, what the processes or the steps that a country can outsource. And I know that for controlled medicines, like in Nigeria, and all over the world, I think that's the standard, that controlled medicines are to be purchased or imported and distributed by the Federal Ministry of Health. So I'm asking, in situations where due to government protocols, those medicines are not available, and it may become easier for a private sector for obvious reasons to import those products on behalf of the government, that what are the ethical implications of that? Thank you.
I think whatever the rules are, whatever the compliance systems are for managing controlled substances, if you are able to regulate that, then anyone should be able to import that. I mean, that is my thinking. Now, it may change from country to country because in some countries, there are certain controlled substances which can only be imported by government agencies. Now, it's a matter of national policy. You cannot go beyond national policy. So, for example, now I'm not really sure about what it is in Nigeria. So, if in Nigeria, if there is a federal government policy that private sector cannot import some of the controlled substances, then they can't. So, for that to happen, first of all, that policy needs to change, and then whatever compliance system there is for the government organization, the same need to be applied to the private sector. Now, if I give an example of India, in India, what I think except radioactive material, I think that's the only thing. I think anything else, anything and everything can be imported by the private sector. The only thing is that for every kind of material, there are certain regulations, rules, checks, compliance systems. So those have to be, managed by whoever is doing that. They have to get the right license. They have to report to the government. They have to make sure they are, using the right kind of vehicle. I mean, even if it is ship or plane, airplane, or inland, in-country logistics. So, for example, for some biologically hazardous material, there are specialized trucks. Where there is a very least chance of contamination or leakage. So those kind of things have to be taken care of. But again, eventually, it's the country's prerogative if there is a policy to do that. But yes, in principle, it can be done. But again, compliances have to be followed. I hope that answers your question. Again,
Yes.
it's a country context, I mean, it differs
Yes.
from country to country.
Yes, thank you very much.
Yeah. So if no further questions, then Gilles, over to you. Back to you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for all the good discussion. So now we are progressing and moving to some element of management of outsourcing. We mentioned a bit earlier when we were discussing, the quality is the element of managing quality. And clearly, on the long run, managing a supplier, managing a logistics service provider is a different job than managing logistics directly. Of course, you need to understand how warehouse management, how transportation, how procurement functions. But it's not the same job to manage someone or to manage an organization who's going to be doing it than to actually do it yourself as an individual, as a group, or as an organization. So really, when you engage into this process, if you engage into the process of outsourcing, you need to always keep in mind that it's not only an external transformation. You're not just doing something which is going to be transfer a responsibility to someone outside. You're also changing the profile of your role as an organization or as individuals. So the competencies which are going to be required, the organization internally, all this will have to change. So it's not only, again, finding the right external partner, it's also finding the right internal structure. But basically here we've put 3 key steps on how we can manage the outsourcing process. First of all, yes, it's to clarify the expectation right from the beginning, and this will be done through the request for proposal. You will have to develop a very clear cahier des charges, specification. You will really need to develop very clear specification about what you're expecting, and publish the specification very broadly, and also probably contact directly some logistics service providers which you think could do the job, so that they are assessing and responding to your request for proposition. Once you receive proposition, of course, you will have to look at all those propositions. You will need to have a debate. You will need to go and make selection on the basis of the file, but you will also obviously need to go and visit the sites, visit the organization. People can put beautiful things on paper, but when you go and you look at the warehouses or the places where they operate, you will realize that maybe they are very far from what you expect. So a warehouse, a fleet is something that quantitative information are not sufficient to understand what's happening. You need qualitative information, and the best way to get qualitative information is usually to go on site and check what is happening there in reality. Obsolescence, for instance, of the fleet will be something to look at. Sanjay is mentioning in the chat the skills of the staff. Of course, not only the skills, but also the mindset, also the culture of the organization. Will they fit to what you are expecting? You are going to give your product, which is the heart, not the heart, but an important element of your organization. You are going to give your product to someone else. So if you give your children to a child caretaker, you will make sure that this person who is going to take care of your children is the right person. It's the same thing with the product. You want to make sure that the person who is going to take care of your product or the organization will do that. And so you go through a process of reviewing those propositions, and then moving to a process where you are going to define the contract, agree on the contract, and by doing this, you will also start to learn by interacting with each other, seeing how they respond to your demand, how they respond to your question, and you can start to build a relationship which you will feel maybe strong or not strong. One element which is important is the key performance indicators and the service levels. So how you are going to monitor on a regular basis the performance of the organization and the success of the contract. So service level is more about we want all the orders that we've given you on day one to be all shipped by the end of the week or by the end of the third days. We want a response to any emails that we would send to you. We send to you within a maximum of 24 hours. So this kind of elements are more like service levels, while the KPI would be more about, okay, we are going to monitor together the level, for instance, of success, number of orders shipped in good quantity, good quality, in an agreed timeline. Then this will give you, for instance, a KPI, number of line, number of items, number of wrong shipment. All these give you a key performance indicator. All these are quantitative information. So you always also need to keep some element of qualitative information, which are more subjective information sometimes, but which are as important as quantitative information. So please, when you do a contract for an outsourcing, make sure about what you would like to expect in terms of qualitative information. And it can be about just, your satisfaction, the relationship, the quality of the communication, how your teams are feeling when they engage with the third-party logistic, if they feel they are treated like an important customer, or if they feel that they are neglected. All those kind of elements can be also clearly mentioned into a contract and into the performance indicators under qualitative performance indicator versus quantitative performance indicator. And then throughout once the contract is signed and once you've initiated your outsourcing and your relationship, then of course you need to have a very clear, very close vendor management, very close control, very close relationship. You cannot leave third-party logistics only relying on information they will get, for instance, through the LMIS system, through information batches of data that they would get, and just leave them to manage that. No, you need to have a very, very close relationship. Very often, what organizations do when they outsource their activity, they put one of their team. It can be one person. You can call it an implant, or it can be a team that is going to be based at your service providers. So you decide to have someone who is on your payroll, who is from your team, from your culture, from your organization, who is based at the third-party vendor, where he's going to, in fact, be your eyes and your ears in that place. It's going to be your mouth also when you have to put some order in place. So those various steps are really elements to understand that, yes, first you determine what you need, you explain clearly the solution, you sign your contract with very clear expectations that are shared and mutually agreed, and then you keep an ongoing relationship. And that's why we say, transparency, communication, visibility, clarity, also clarity on what's happening is key in managing a third-party vendor. When we talk about clarity, it means that it's not only to have access to all the data that are here. Of course, you want that, but sometimes having access to all the data can be confusing. What you need is clear information. People will give you the information which is relevant for you. So people who don't try to look good always, people who are really in a partnership agreement, partnership relationship where they are going to agree with you. There are many things that you can do when you outsource, when you go for outsourcing. For instance, if you have an important team internally, you can also ask within the contract for outsourcing that your personnel, your staff, your team will be re-employed by the third-party logistic. This is a way to avoid, when you outsource large part of your organization, to have an important social impact. So those are elements that are part of the negotiation. Everything you think which is good for you, that you want, you need to say to your logistics service provider, to the third-party vendor, because they are the one who can answer and come up with solution to a situation that would be complicated. Another element beyond the staff, it's also the information system. Who is going to be managing the information system? Who is going to be in charge of keeping, ensuring the security of the data which are being collected? Who is going to make sure that there are backups of this information in case of there is a system breakdown? Who is going to be in charge of exchanging the batch of information between you, where you get information, and the third party? So all those elements really are part of the detailed and sometimes complex contract, which are going to set the relationship between a third-party logistics and a CMS, a central medical store. So if we look at, when we go through this process, how people can sometimes view that process, and particularly this question about why wouldn't you outsource? If you come with an idea of outsourcing, there may be some pros. You can see some of the clear ideas, some of the things which were mentioned earlier. Like, for instance, you move from fixed cost to variable cost. You focus on your heart on the heart of your business, on your real value that you're providing, instead of focusing on ancillary function or side function that you may not consider as your heart of your business. But there may be also some other issues. So some of the points which are often raised. So central medical store will often state that an outsourced logistics service provider costs more than operating an in-house fleet, and the service level is poor. The definition of service level isn't always clear, and that's what we were talking about just before. And what really means is that the transport wasn't all their beck and call. Okay, what we can see here, yeah, sometimes the cost, the absolute cost you will see will increase, but maybe because you move to variable costs rather than fixed cost. It's also a way to ensure that you have a better optimization of those costs. And also, again, the service level itself, by going through this process, if you work with real professionals of transport and outsourcing, for instance, they will come up with very clear information about what a good service level should be. So they can also provide information that you would not be aware of, not by going through this relationship with professional external organization. Another point is an outsourced logistics service provider will say that their most competitive rate is dependent on good vehicle utilization. Okay, fast-moving consumer goods clients prescribe specific collection and delivery times, which they adhere to, but central medical stores are not always in that mood. It's true that sometimes central medical store can make trucks wait an entire day. So of course, if you have this mindset, well, it's my fleet, it's internal fleet, so I don't need to optimize the turnover of that fleet and the utilization of that fleet. And when you move to an outsourced contract, people make the money on the time that the truck are spending being utilized. So if you immobilize a truck for one full day just to load it, of course, it's not a good use of this resource. So that's why for logistics service providers, optimized use of their truck is very, very important. And it's true that in the private sector, if you send a truck in the private sector, they know they will have half an hour. They take an appointment to deliver, to load or to unload their truck. Maybe it's half an hour. They arrive at 8, at 8:30, they are gone, everything has been done. It's a big pressure on the transporter, on the truck driver, because he knows he has to be there on time. If he arrives too late, the doors will be closed, or they will tell him, okay, you are late, so you will wait. You'll come at the end, we'll take care of you at the end of when we finish with everyone. So maybe they will wait 2 hours, 3 hours, maybe 1 day before they can be unloaded. So they've lost one full day. So this is really something where good vehicle utilization is very important. And this is also where something like the outsourcing process can bring some order, can put some limit and some barrier to sometimes practices which would not be the most effective one so far. A central medical store will say they need flexibility from transporter because of pick pack is manual and they did not avoid delays. Well, this is the same kind of thing, pick pack manual. You need to organize your pick pack. You need to make sure about when your deliveries are ready for pickup, when they can be shipped. All this is part of professional practices. And again, this is reflecting the fact that maybe a central medical store will not consider that pick, pack, and transport is the heart of their business. Maybe they will consider that the heart of their business is quality assurance, procurement, vendor identification, lab test, all this kind of thing. Maybe they will think that this is the heart of the business, and they will think that pick and pack and shipping is not the heart of the business, and that's where you may have some lack of efficiency. It's not always the case. We are going to talk about the Uganda experience just after, where you will see in Uganda, they really feel that warehousing, pick, pack, and ship is really where they have a lot of expertise and experiences. And even if they outsource some of those activities, they still keep in-house a strong expertise to manage the vendors. Our critics will always say that private transport is more expensive and private sector logistics service providers are getting rich. Well, I think this is really a statement which is not always, which needs to be checked and developed, because logistics and supply is not a sector where it's not a sector where people really get rich, to be honest. The margin which are done in this kind of activities are not huge. Those are very interesting jobs. Those are, good job. If you do your job well, you can make money, but not to the point where you are going to get immensely rich. Successful execution of an efficient service is dependent on discipline at the CMS to load and pre-agreed collection. So we discussed that, of course. Discipline and rigor is very important in supply chain. Communication and transparency, being strict when we take appointment, all those elements are important. So, of course, as we can see, there's a lot of reasons why you could say you would not outsource, but I think the reasons which are here are not as solid as others that have been raised by Sanjay a bit earlier about essentially why we would not outsource. And essentially, we may decide not to outsource because we feel that this is the heart of our business. We want to keep really a control on this internally, and we are putting the right resources to do the job properly. One thing also to keep in mind, I don't want to say it's very easy because it's not very easy, but it's relatively easy to outsource an activity. So for instance, if you have your warehouse, to outsource your warehouse is a process which is complicated, but it can be easily, done because you're moving from fixed fund to variable cost. You're moving from fixed cost to variable cost. So it's kind of easy process to reverse. To move from something which is outsourced to insource some activities, this is much more complicated. You will have to find skills, you will have to build up teams, you will have to invest in infrastructure, you will have to really redo everything as if you are starting from scratch. And you will need very, very strong argument for doing that, because the amount of money which is going to be required to do this will be huge, and you will get a lot of resistance from management and from many stakeholders if you start to if you want to move from outside to inside. So the process of outsourcing is really the most current one. Okay, we're going to talk about Uganda. So Uganda is in fact, there is a central medical store which is based in Kampala and which used to ship and manage everything for the entire country, and they wanted to outsource the last mile delivery and only keep delivery to some depot that they're having internally. So clearly, what is this? What are the different points? So the transportation from central warehouse to district is now contracted out. As I said, at the beginning, they were having one central warehouse in Kampala, and from that central warehouse in Kampala, they were shipping to all around the country. They were having most of the trucks were owned by them, although they could sometimes, when they were having peak of activities, outsource the surplus. So today, they've moved to a situation where the last mile delivery to healthcare is fully done by a third-party logistics. So to them, they are delivering to a district depot, but then from the district depot, there is an outsourced solution which is taking over. So how have they done that? They've done a pilot outsourcing project, which was conducted to understand benefit and challenge. So they've done a piloting element on some specific area. And then they've done the transportation from central warehouse to district depot, which is performed by their central fleet. And then they've only outsourced from district to the health facility, from the district depot to the health facility, the transportation. So they keep an internal control to the district depot, and then they have outsourced the rest. They have worked with two providers. A multimodal solution was adopted with two providers. So multimodal, it means that they have different transportation, mode of transportation. It can be trucks, it can be small cars, it can be motorbikes, it can be, so there is a fleet, a large variety of solutions. And then they've done, of course, long-term procurement process with detailed background checks to assess capacity. So again, it's not based only on the document they've received. They go and see how it works. You can see there is 5 business days is the service level for providers to reach the health facilities. So as we are saying, what is the service level? Here we have an example, and the accuracy of timeless of product delivery has improved significantly. So here we have a situation where Uganda, the central medical store, was managing everything internally. They were doing everything to the health center, all the deliveries, everything. And sometimes when they have a peak of activities, they manage this peak by outsourcing the activity, whether it is from central to the final depot or everything. And they've moved to a situation after doing the test, after challenging various organizations, various third-party logistics, they've come to the situation where they've decided to, in fact, focus on the central depot to district depot. That's their responsibility. And then from the district depot to the health post, to the health facilities, this is where they've outsourced the activity. So that's an example. Uganda is working particularly well. One strong thing to know with Uganda is that, in fact, it's a fully push, not fully push, but it's a very strong push model because they get all the money. In fact, the state is allocating to the central medical store an annual budget for procurement of medicine. And the central medical store is fully in charge of this budget. So they do their quantification exercise, they get the forecast from the health post, from the health partners, from everywhere. But at the end of the day, once they've done all the quantification exercise, they match that with the budget which is allocated to them. And they make the choices. So they have a very clear responsibility. Since they hold the budget, since they get all the data, then it's very clear they are the one who have the responsibilities in allocating the quantities to the various health centers. It's a big responsibility. Sometimes they get, of course, there are arguments and there are discussion and challenges and competition about who should get what. But at the end of the day, their strength is that once they decided that plan of distribution, they make this distribution to every country. They plan the distribution. They inform everyone about the quantities that they are going to receive, sometimes 6 months in advance. They inform all the health center 6 months in advance about all the quantities they are going to receive in the season, and then they plan those delivery and then they deliver. And it works very well, because even if there are frustration from some places where they think, oh, they should get more, they should get, at least there is no frustration because they are not informed. So everybody is informed in advance, and the service level agreement that they've reached are very good. So of course, this situation is not possible in every country. The political decisions to make sure that you identify very clear responsibility on who is going to have the final signature on quantities to be shipped and the shipment plan. This is something which is a luxury that not all countries have. Okay, I've been speaking a lot, and I know today Sanjay has spoke a lot also, and I speak a lot too, so sorry for that. Now, please, over to you. If you have some comment on what we've discussed, if you have some element that you want to share, some experience you want to share about that, and particularly in the view of the cost, money is money is a devil. But it's not only a devil. Money is a useful tool, a very, very useful tool. As I say, money is the best servant, but it's the worst master. So that's going to be my say of the day. A special dedicated for Priyanka. I know she likes this kind of thing. Sorry. So what is the cost for, what do you think? Is outsourcing cheaper? Any experience you want to share on that?
Well, you can also tell us, in an ideal scenario, do you think outsourcing will be cheaper? Even if you take an example of transportation, for example.
Well, after all, maybe you're right. Huh? Being cheap or not being cheap is not the key, may not be the key stake. And maybe it's
Indeed.
more about being efficient or not being efficient, being effective or not being effective. So yeah, one comment from Ukamaka Okafor: outsourcing should be cheaper and time saving too, since the maintenance of the vehicles and so on will be borne by the third-party logistics company in case of transportation. Yeah. And to be honest, also, what you're saying is very true. You need, I think, in the WFP experience, we are talking about closed book negotiation, which means that WFP doesn't want to enter into, the internal kitchen, how people are playing with the numbers. But when you do an important outsourcing project, not only on transportation but also on warehousing, you need to enter into the numbers. Because that's how you will be able to get a cheap price. And maybe WFP, they only outsource one part of their they outsource one part of the things. They don't want to enter into this. As Sanjay was saying, the heart of their business is food security, nutrition, these kind of things. While if you really want to take transportation and warehousing seriously, you need to enter the numbers. You need to enter into the numbers and understand what are the costs. So you may want to manage negotiation on an open book policy and asking people to use the numbers.
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple of scenarios actually here. In case of WFP, I think there are some established standards, global standards. So not standards, but rather benchmarks. So we know more or less that the prices that are going to be quoted would be in that range. Now, if it is beyond that range, then of course, you know that something is not right. And since it's a large competitive bid, you know that the prices would be in that range. So the reason why they're doing closed book negotiations is because they don't want to waste their time in doing that, because majority of places, they are working in emergency contexts, and where the turnaround time is very fast. So if they're wasting time in negotiation, then that means that some product is sitting in the warehouse which is not reaching the field. So that is their strategy, and they have made peace with that based on the standards and benchmarks. But it may not work in a particular country if there are no established benchmarks. So then, if you are going for outsourcing, you need to understand how that cost is being arrived at, like Gilles is saying, open book negotiation. So even if you are asking for a per metric ton cost, you need to ask, how have you arrived at that cost? What are the key inputs for that cost? Also, does it include taxes? Does it exclude taxes? Are you exempted for taxes? Because tax will play a very key role in this case. In some countries, government organizations are exempted to pay tax, while in other countries, it may not be so. So, tax may also be a key issue that you need to take care of. So there are several things, that needs to go into a negotiation or determination of prices. For example, even before, I think, who was asking? I think Ihab was asking that how are these costs are they fixed? Are they variable? Again, there is no one size fits all here. It really depends on the country, context, your need, volume, taxes, coverage, all these things. It depends on that. I mean, there may be some places where there is a fixed cost. If for example, you tell them that we need 10 trucks at any given time, for example, even if there is no need, if anyone not sending any product anywhere, if you need 10 trucks or 2 trucks or 5 trucks, and you're not sending anything, then how will they calculate a per metric ton fee? So in those cases, you may have to pay a fixed cost per month, for example. And then any transportation activity that is happening, that is then being calculated in terms of weight and in terms of distance covered. So it is not that, okay, if it is working like this for WFP, is it working like this for Uganda, then it will work for you as well. No, it will not. Again, what we're trying to do here is telling you how outsourcing works, in an ideal scenario, or what are the challenges for outsourcing? How do you mitigate those challenges? But whenever you need to do an outsourcing project, you need to start from the very beginning, from the conditions. Why do you need outsourcing? So if you start from there, then it is possible that your outsourcing will be successful. There are several cases that I can find for you where outsourcing was actually not cheaper. And the reason being, because the organization who gave the contract for outsourcing, they were not disciplined. So instead they were losing money eventually, because as per the contracts which were established, the vendor is charging them the fee, but they are not sending anything. So that would be a loss-making business. So outsourcing would mean that the organization will also become quite disciplined in their processes. Otherwise, it will be a loss-making scenario. Yeah.
Thank
you.
Yeah, one last point also, Paul. Yeah, one last point also on the cost. It's also good to know which percentage of your overall cost or overall business, or if you are a private company, commercial company, of your income, you are ready to spend on this. So before you start, you need to know that, for instance, we are going to say that 3% of our overall turnover will be invested in supply chain and logistics. And normally the kind of cost that you can see in private sector, commercial sector. So you need to have that idea, because otherwise, when you negotiate, you don't have the upfront limit that you want to reach. So those very broad global parameters are also important when you move into. Anyway, we're now moving to a sondage, a quiz. Which supply chain function in your country will perform better if outsourced? Okay, that's an idea, one choice. Now you go for the one you think could be outsourced and would work better in that way. And then once we'll have answered this, we have a little time for question and answer before we close that course. Thank you for the results. Full transportation, 30%. Last mile transportation reverse logic, 43%. That's the winner. Warehousing, 29%. Okay. I mean, those are really the answers are very good. The profile of answer is very, very good, because it reflects really what is the most standard and the most easier functions that can be outsourced. Procurement can be outsourced. It's a bit more complicated. HR can be outsourced. It's much more complicated. So yes, thank you for those answers. Question and answer. Any specific answer? Any specific point that you would like to discuss right now before we close this session and move to just review what we are discussing a bit earlier about the next steps? Okay, let me move on, and these are some questions. We'll take them as they go. You will see the final course evaluation appearing on your system when you are doing the final weeks. So please, make sure, rate the experience of the course. That's very important for us. Also, if you have any suggestion, any point, I mean, we are still a new company, 2 years of existence, and getting older every day. But we also want to get wiser, and we need you for that. So any suggestion you can make, please send us very honest feedback. We'll always take them as a constructive input for improving our activity. So please send us feedback. We like that. So the next step we are discussing a bit earlier, the important thing to get the Cpd certificate by August the 6th. Everyone should have finished the course, and then you need to get your 5 attempts to get the final assessment, and you need to get 60% or higher to get the certificate. Again, as we said, the Cpd certification service is a UK-based professional accreditation organization. It accredits a lot of certificates from UN agencies, big NGO like Save the Children, to even big academic, I mean, some of the most prestigious academic like the London School of Economics, some of their courses are also accredited through the Cpd certification service. So it's just to say that it's a reference in this sector and in many other sectors. So please make sure you get that certificate with this accreditation. And for that, please complete the course on time and make the most of your 5 scheduled attempts to get the Cpd. You can pay for an extra 5 attempts with a penalty of $50, but I would really encourage everyone to avoid that. So please, again, make sure you see we're really begging you, as was begging you for feedback and begging you to make the course on time and get your certificate. There will be a certificate ceremony. I don't think there is a slide mentioning that.
No, but it will be after, once everyone has finished it, then we'll send an email with the dates and everything.
We'll announce the certificate, the ceremony for the certification, which is going to take place once, of course, everybody has completed. But be ready for that. So please, feedback today on today's session. How did you appreciate this session? Was it useful, not useful? Please, you rate according to that. I hope that everyone at the beginning of the session who were not in the top fantastic and very good mood are now getting better. I hope that everybody has moved up on the scale of feeling good. Anyway, we will be in contact soon. Keep on the good work, and then we will be in contact on the Hive, be in contact in the next exchanges, the next lesson, the next meeting like that should be the certificate. Huh?
Yeah,
certificate ceremony. So we will keep you informed of that. Thank you all for this. Thank you all for your commitment. Thank you all for the good work. And we are always here, you know, on the WhatsApp, on group, on the Hive. Feel free to contact us with any question. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day, and you know, we hope everyone gets the certificate like discussed. And please don't hesitate to write to us or send messages on the WhatsApp group that has been created for any issues.